Member for Ancillary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't be as long as the speaker that went before me. I noticed the leader of the opposition was falling asleep during his presentation. That, Mr. Speaker, is quite instructive of how entertaining it was. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my unwavering support to this rather comprehensive and holistic approach to the development of sports that is being articulated in our attempt to borrow monies for the improvement in our sporting facilities island-wide. Mr. Speaker, this really is in keeping with my own passion as a parliamentary rep from my constituency. And whilst we have not been included in this program in the first phase, like the MP for Grosley, I'm looking forward to being in the second phase. But I am very grateful, and I make no apologies for saying that I commend my government for including my constituency in the constituency development program, where adequate attention is being given to an important playing field, Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, and I make reference of the Jackmel playing field, which has been left neglected for varying reasons, Mr. Speaker. But Jackmel is so important, Mr. Speaker, in that it represents the old-time mecca for sports in the Roseau Valley. And, Mr. Speaker, it now gives us the opportunity to revive and to revitalize a very important sporting facility within the Roseau Valley area. So, Mr. Speaker, that is under construction now, and some $500,000 is being spent through the Constituency Development Program. Mr. Speaker, as we look to improve the Jackmel facility, I look forward to receiving allocations, Mr. Speaker, from this program to upgrade it even further, Mr. Speaker, as we contemplate lights and as we contemplate seating opportunities for the young people of the Roseau Valley area. Mr. Speaker, a lot was spoken about in terms of facilities and in terms of synthetic track and whether it's allowed or disallowed. But, Mr. Speaker, very little was spoken on development. Development of sporting athletes. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, this area is dear to my heart because the member for Castries South, when he was the CEO of West Indies Cricket, I had him to follow me in a program to develop young under-15 boys. Because, Mr. Speaker, what wasn't clear to a lot of people and a lot of the people administering cricket at the time was the fact that the West Indies had enjoyed a long history of dominance in world cricket. Mr. Speaker, there's no other sporting team that would have said that they are world champions for 20 years in succession. And that leads from 1975 to 1995. The West Indies team dominated every single team. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm raising this point because of our neglect of being very deliberate in terms of how we produce cricketers to replace the great cricketers of old. We saw very starkly a slide in the standard of cricket. And as the rest of the world, Mr. Speaker, went on to innovate and to initiate scientific and clinical programs towards the development of their program. I give you an example, Mr. Speaker. So the average Indian player, for example, in the 1970s would have only had the opportunity to face fast bowling when they would have come up against the West Indies team. But, Mr. Speaker, with the innovation of the bowling machine technology, they can practice in the nets bowling that is up to 120 miles an hour if they wish, Mr. Speaker, thus preparing them, Mr. Speaker, to come up against bowling on the world stage for about 90 miles an hour. So there was an application of science and the very latest technologies that were being implemented, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our that cricketers who were competing against the West Indies cricketers were actually well prepared to come up against fast bowling, for example. Now, Mr. Speaker, the point must be made today that facilities alone don't make champions. And so if you want to brag and you want to be the minister of playing fields, then go right ahead. But I'm aware, Mr. Speaker, that this plan is more comprehensive than playing fields. It's more comprehensive than astro versus natural turf. And it's more comprehensive as to whether we should have specialized grounds or not. But, Mr. Speaker, it also includes the conceptualization and the institution of a national sports academy, which have been outlined by the member for Grosley. And, Mr. Speaker, this is where the real difference will be made, is in those development programs where in them you can spend the money and the time to institute the very latest technologies in the development of a lot of your sporting talent across the spectrum, Mr. Speaker, in the areas of focus. And so, Mr. Speaker, one of the sad things about our country, and we mentioned world champions, you know, when I think back of sports and I look at the outcomes that we've had so far, I see that in St. Lucia, I would say only 3 of our athletes have been world champions and have attained world championship status. And, Mr. Speaker, we tend to forget Mr. Rick Wayne, who was a global and a bodybuilder of international repute. And then I would say Darren Sammy and Laverne Spencer. But, Mr. Speaker, outside of that, we've had a lot of talented players. And Kimani Melius was mentioned, that at present, he is one of the most talented at the youth level. But, Mr. Speaker, when you get to the other levels in sport, talent alone cannot take you there. There must be a very deliberate strategy for development. And so one of my major disappointments with the last 5 years to have preceded us in the government is that there wasn't a single national development academy. Mr. Speaker, how can a country that is serious about sport not institute a national academy? Not in any of the sporting disciplines. And the former Minister of Sport is there. He can tell me if I am wrong, and I am willing to withdraw the statement. But I cannot remember, Mr. Speaker, any national development academy that took a strategic and a very deliberate approach to develop the talent of our sportsmen and women, to harness that talent, Mr. Speaker, to take it to the next level. What I remember is that there was a lot of focus on playing fields. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a mistake that we hope not to repeat. This is a mistake, Mr. Speaker, that cannot be allowed. We have to be deliberate about getting international athletes and providing athletes with that avenue by which that they can develop. It's not about sending one athlete away on a scholarship, or neither is it about sending someone on a job. But it really has to be, the fundamental difference here is that this project entails a strategic approach to make sure that the talent of our athletes are being harnessed, so that, you know, you wouldn't have a Rick Wayne or a Laverne Spencer or Darren Sammy happening by chance. Can't be by chance. It has to be a very deliberate strategy. And so, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the news and I welcome the move by this government that is part of this project, that it will institute the National Sports Academy. Mr. Speaker, very quickly, I want to take a moment to debunk some of the issues raised by the uninformed member for Castries South, who spoke a lot today, but really had a difficulty in aligning a lot of what he said to truth. Mr. Speaker, he has been the director of sport in the St. Lucia administration. He has been permanent secretary in that Ministry of Sport as well. But it is quite convenient today, now that he's an opposition politician, that having had the opportunity to institute a national sports policy, both as Director of Sport and also as Permanent Secretary, that today he's in opposition, that it is somehow the right time for there to be the development of such a strategy. And I wondered, Mr. Speaker, whether while he was serving in those capacities, whether the opportunity did not present itself for him to do so. Mr. Speaker, he also attacked the Parker Company, said he went on their website and indicated, Mr. Speaker, that the company, he didn't see any development, any track record of the development of sports and so on. Mr. Speaker, it's not, the whole Caribbean knows about Don Lockerbie. Mr. Speaker, when the ICC was looking to assess the readiness of the Caribbean as to whether we could have hosted the 2007 World Cup, who did they call? They called Mr. Don Lockerbie to do it. And so, Mr. Speaker, this gives me very much the comfort that we're choosing a company headed by an individual with the right level of expertise, with the right track record. He's been an Olympian for his country, represented the United States, Mr. Speaker, and someone who knows about sports development in St. Lucia. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that really, I do believe that we have chosen the right man for the job. Mr. Speaker, a lot was also said about the synthetic track. But, Mr. Speaker, I have in my hand a media release from FIFA, and the headline says, "Artificial turf now covered in the laws of the game of football." Mr. Speaker, it was dated February 2004, and it reads, Mr. Speaker, that at its last meeting on the 20th of February 2004, the International Football Association Board, the custodian of the laws of the game in football, decided that a reference to field surface, including artificial turf, would be added to the laws of the game. Mr. Speaker, you can determine from that the International Football Federation's acceptance or receptiveness to playing fields. Mr. Speaker, the press release ends by saying over 75 FIFA recommended surfaces have been installed worldwide. And tons of major events have been played on artificial turf. There's no need to debate that. That is a well-known fact. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to end on this note. And that is what we see here today, and we continue to see in all of our debates, is the politics taking supremacy over the development of the country. Whether we are here to talk about sports, whether we are here to talk about our finances, and we're seeing on the side of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, that politics is given that primacy. Politics is given, Mr. Speaker, priority over our development goals. And, Mr. Speaker, this is the most dangerous thing that I believe that is taking place in these debates, and certainly the mood and the spirit with which the opposition has approached them is very, very disappointing. And so, Mr. Speaker, having said this, I want to thank you, and I want to, at the same time, give my unwavering support to this motion brought by the Minister of Finance. Thank you.